Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Experiences in your own home. Hey guys, so it's 3 a.m. here and I should be asleep, but instead I'm sitting on 4chan. Let's discuss something. What have you ever experienced in your own home? I'll happily start. When I was younger, I had that typical fear of something you don't quite understand and can't see being around you, watching you, or in your home. I moved where I live now, 23, when I was 4, and have a stable, normal relationship with my parents, who until my father died, had a normal, stable marriage. I'd recently discovered the concept of the paranormal by watching some typical TV ratings trap ghost hunter type show, and was unimpressed, but thought back to my childhood and those uneasy feelings. I decided why not, and simply asked that if there was anyone there, they should make themselves known. In that instant, about 2 seconds later, a birthday card fell off the fireplace, not lit. I bolted out of there. I was on the sofa several feet away, so I know I didn't cause it. My parents have mentioned some experiences. When my mother's mother passed away, my father was at home and claimed to have seen someone walk past the bay window of the kitchen. He had no idea she had died. My mother claimed the elderly woman who died in this house was still around when we moved it. My mother felt that by walking around at night and out into the large garden informing the woman that she was dead and we lived here now, made her leave. Funnily enough, this would line up with when my uneasiness stopped, but I only learnt of this years later. Don't know what's brought this up, or made me be a first-time visitor and poster to X. But maybe it's that my mother believes my deceased father is now watching over her, based on the near avoidance of an unnecessary major spinal operation due to a National Health Service surgeon's incompetence. He no longer practices in the UK. I look forward to hearing about your experiences in your home, X. In retrospect, I don't think I've ever felt in danger at all, but I have a perpetual fear of the spiritual and demonic, maybe due to a lack of understanding. I guess I fear the idea of something I can't physically overpower, or being so outmatched in that situation. My mother, in a discussion about the paranormal, says that she's certain there is nothing in this house. I'll be honest, I don't think I want to know one way or the other. Certainly wouldn't use a board to find out.
Had something odd happen last night? Funny enough. Not that exciting in retrospect, but I was freaking myself out at the time. 3 a.m., get up to go to the bathroom. As I'm walking along the landing, I hear something move downstairs. Rest of my family are all in bed. The cat is on the landing at my feet, so everyone in the house is accounted for. Don't think much of it. Sister sometimes has friends over who sleep on the couch. On my way back to my room, I asked her if anyone was staying over. She says no. Okay, whatever. Probably something falling over randomly, as they tend to do. Get nice and comfy in bed. Suddenly my sister starts banging on the wall and saying that she can hear something clattering downstairs. Come out of my room and stay quiet for a bit, listening. Suddenly there's another sound, much louder than before, then another. Sister panicking. Commotion wakes up my mum. After explaining what was going on, my mum and I arm ourselves with such deadly weapons as wire coat hangers and reach extenders and head downstairs, comb the entire house, and find absolutely nothing. Everything seemed to be in its place, no sign of anything having moved at all. Go to bed spooked. I'm sure there was something there at some point because the later sounds seemed very loud and frequent. It was the first time I've ever experienced anything at all in this house, paranormal or otherwise.
I live in an old home on 75 acres of land. The current home was built over a cottage that had been there since the 1800s. Next door is a 2-acre cemetery that started as a family cemetery, but later plots were sold to locals, so now it's a local cemetery on our property that we maintain. There have been roughly 25 deaths in the house and cottage over the course of many years. 5 of those deaths were violent self-terminations. The house is also split level. The top is its own house now, and the bottom is a one-bedroom apartment that my wife and I live in. My near-death aunt, who we take care of, lives in the top half. I have heard screaming in the downstairs half-bath when trying to take a piss many a night. My wife, my aunt, and myself will not go up into the top half past midnight. There is a thing that stands at the end of the hall that joins the living room, and it stands there looking at a bedroom door. If you turn and see it, it will turn and look at you before rushing down the hall and disappearing. Lights go on and off at random throughout the day. TVs will change channels like someone is channel surfing before returning to the previous channel. I have a bowl for my keys at the doorway, and stuff will go missing from there, only to reappear in odd places. I have had guests over, and they have asked me what keeps calling their name. It happens with the family as well. So much, in fact, it's a common occurrence now that we simply ignore. We also hear and see strange things on the outside of the house. Since I was a child and my family were children, so on, we were never allowed near the wood line after dark. I got drunk once and wandered into the woods near the cemetery and stopped dead in my tracks when I heard laughing and then screaming. The screaming did not stop until I exited the wood line and was running back for the house. We have been told there is an old spirit that haunts the woods that has been there since it was first settled. I have more shit. I will throw some other stuff out there, but I usually run out of post space and I'm not very good at typing. Anyways, I will start with another common occurrence. My wife has woken up many a night to see shifting shadows outside the basement windows that are at ground level. She once pulled the curtains aside to see a giant black shaggy-looking dog looking back at her. She said it looked like an Irish wolfhound, and a husky had a baby, but it had orange eyes. When they locked eyes, her heart hurt for a second and it booked it for the tree line. Another time she shook me awake to tell me she saw it in the house directly across from the bed, just sitting in the corner watching. She could see the eyes and a scruff outline in the dark. The dogs were all upstairs for some odd reason when they always slept on the bed. I have had a few others that have stayed over tell me they hear something prowling outside the windows of the guest room. Hell, just last night we heard a deep growl that sent our dogs running to the bed, and we couldn't find the source. I thought it might be an earthquake, because we live on the New Madrid fault line, and since we are underground, I thought we might hear a rumble more. United States Geological Survey said no noticeable quakes that night. Another odd thing is that our family used to leave parts of our hunting kills out in the woods, before my father self-terminated himself as well. We would go hunting and I was told we had to leave the head and the hind legs in a certain position. When I asked him why, he didn't even know. It's just always been done this way. Anyways, there is more I could tell about the woods and cemetery, but I covered what Op wanted the house itself. Again, if there is a certain bit I said you would like in detail, please let me know. I got time to kill.
Please elaborate on this. There is a thing that stands at the end of the hall that joins the living room, and it stands there looking at a bedroom door. If you turn and see it, it will turn and look at you before rushing down the hall and disappearing.
For some odd reason, after midnight there is this thing. It's made of shadow, but not made of shadow. It looks like a tall, thin person wearing a long night robe. It has a black mask with a single tear mark under the left eye. If I or anyone else goes up the stairs and turns to look at it, it will slowly turn its head to face you. Its eyes behind the mask, or what is left of them, will slowly open and it will charge you if you continue to look at it. It reminds me of a bear's mock charge because it never quite makes it to you before it evaporates into nothing. The room it faces is an old guest room that was once my uncle's. My uncle shot himself in it one night before I was born. We just try to ignore it. We hurry into the kitchen to grab drinks or food, but my aunt's room is right across from that particular room, and she will not come out no matter what after midnight. I've tried to film it. I've tried to take photos of it, but the photos just appear oversaturated and it will only appear in full darkness. I included a very shitty MS Paint drawing of how it looks from overhead. The black circle is the thing.
Uncle shot self. Father also self-terminated. Place is haunted enough to be in a movie. And your reason for not moving from this soul-eating construct is?
My family has been living on this land for generations since the 1800s. We received huge land grants from the state and sold bits of it off as time went on, and now there is a town around us. The house is paid off. farming a bit of it near the wood line for food. Only things I have to pay for are taxes and basic bills. I have been in this house for 27 years now. I'm just kind of used to it, oddly enough. I mean, it terrified me as a kid, but now it just seems like it's part of the house. If I could move, I probably would, but for some reason I just feel like something is really wrong when I'm away from it for too long. My dad tried to get away as well. It drove him insane before he moved back in and self-terminated in my old bedroom. I really don't know if I can now.
My old house was pretty strange. My ex-girlfriend would tell me how she could hear cupboards closing late at night while we were in bed. She recreated the sound by slightly opening the cupboard door and letting it close by its own weight, and it made a slight bump sound that would repeat as the door would gently bounce off the cupboard. Later, my friend stayed the night and slept on my couch and said he heard the cupboards making that noise, and my girlfriend said, "See, I'm not crazy." Another strange incident that I witnessed was when my GF and I were in the basement. It was pretty late, like after midnight, and I hear the doorbell and stay on, buzzing, never turning off. This was strange already because I didn't have a doorbell button, just the two wires. I could tell it was the front door and went upstairs after grabbing a hammer and bringing my dog. I opened the door with the dog by my side and then checked and saw the doorbell wires had been twisted together. Could have been someone playing a joke, but I don't know. Last thing is easily the creepiest thing I've experienced in that house. My friend and I were in the basement again. No GF. We had broken up by then. And it's pretty late. We're both chatting and drinking, and suddenly we hear upstairs. My front door opens and closes, and we both hear someone take maybe 5 steps across the wood floor. My dog didn't react, which was particularly strange. But we both looked at each other, and without saying a word, we both grabbed a bat and walked up the stairs quietly. After checking the front door and seeing it still locked via the deadbolt, we searched the house and found no one. I don't live there anymore, but something was definitely strange in that place.
For the house I'm in right now, I've only had a few unexplainable things go on. I'm about 12 and am trying to fall asleep, lying down on the right side, staring at a tall lamp in the corner of my room. As I start to feel the sleep begin to close my eyes, they snap open for me to see the pale red flash of what seems like a man, floating in front of the lamp with trench coat, scarf, and a top hat, holding his pocket watch and a cane, looking at me. Gone as fast as appeared. Try to sleep on my other side. Feeling of absolute terror doesn't leave me. Sleep on the floor of parents' room. About 3 years later, alone in the house, in the bathroom. House is near silent except for a video I'm watching on my phone. Start hearing voices, think it's my mom. Turn down the video, no more voices. Now it sounds like a music box. This continues for about 2 minutes with me absolutely petrified. Call mom after silence returns. She says I'm imagining things and we don't own music boxes. I forgot to add, for about 2 years after seeing the red guy, I had nightmares when I slept on my right side, facing that wall with the tall lamp. Never had bad dreams when sleeping on my right side outside of my home. After a few years, I got rid of the lamp, moved the bed, and almost always slept on my right side facing that corner, and never had another bad dream. I don't actually believe in the paranormal at all. I think that experience was some sort of sleep paralysis that left a touch of trauma that I basically grew out of. And the music box really was my imagination going nuts.
The house I grew up in, 26 years there, was built on the site of an old brick firing factory. The whole street sits on the site, few instances in that house. I woke up one night and saw a young Victorian-dressed boy standing at the end of my bed. Mum told me the night she thought I wandered into her room and stood at the edge of her bed until she realised it was the same Victorian boy. Me and a friend about to go out and get pissed, standard UK Friday, trying to tune the radio to something decent. Me playing around, hold up the static radio and ask if anyone's there. Tap once for yes. Heard a tap. Laughing at each other, thinking one of us was dicking about, I asked to speak through the radio. Another tap and a voice on the radio. The static said, "There."
My father died 2 years ago, and a couple of strange things happened. My clock would be set back an hour sometimes when I woke up. Also, during my father's birthday this year, my phone pocket dialed my mother's boyfriend 6 times. My parents have been divorced since I was 6. I also have a story about my friend. When we were seniors or juniors in high school, my friend tried to see if there were any spirits in his house. He asked if anyone else was there with him and to show him a sign. His lights started to flicker on and off, so he grabbed his keys and ran out of the house because he was scared. He called me, we hung out, and he told me what happened. Eventually, we went back to his place, and when his brother answered the door, he told us that the light blew out while he was on the computer. His brother knew nothing about what happened earlier. A couple of months passed, and my friend called me again, sounding frightened. Apparently, more things have been happening. He came home that day, and no one was home. When he turned on the light in his room, his closet slammed shut by itself, which is why he booked it and called me. He tells me more. He says every day when he gets out of the shower, there is a letter K drawn on the mirror from the steam. He asked around his house to make sure it wasn't their doing. None of them knew what he was talking about. He also took measures before entering the shower by cleaning the mirror to make sure the K wouldn't show up. It still showed up. It got to a point where my friend would look at the floor when getting out of the shower because he knew the K was going to be there. He also told me that on some occasions he could feel something pressing down on his body when he slept. He slept over at my house that night because he was too afraid to go back home. After we graduated, he became a Marine, so I didn't hear from him for a while. Eventually, he got married to his high school sweetheart, and they had a baby boy. They bought a house together and shared it with another Marine couple who had a 1 or 2-year-old son. I'll call him Sammy. They set up baby monitors around the house to keep an eye on the baby. One day, they noticed something looking down at the baby on the screen. It looks like a face. I had a picture of this, but I can't find it. Sammy gets a look at it and says it's his friend Kira, or something like that. Sammy tells my friend that he can show him where Kira lives. Sammy points to the baby room closet. My friend nopes downstairs. Weird things continued happening from then on. Doors closing by themselves or baby monitors turning off by themselves. Eventually he calls me and catches me up on what's been going on. I remind him of what happened when we were in high school. It blows his mind because he didn't see any connection between this and earlier events. He then tells me that weird stuff like him speaking in foreign languages sitting up in his sleep happened too. His Marine bunkmate told him how much it freaked him out when they were on tour. They end up hiring a medium or something like that to try and get rid of Kira because my buddy and his wife were uncomfortable. It didn't change anything. Weird things still happen from time to time, but he doesn't think about it as much anymore.
I got one. Although this is actually something that happened and not a story. About a little over 10 years ago, my mother and stepfather were getting a divorce. My mother, brother, and I moved to a townhouse complex a few miles away to get out of the house, since it belonged to my stepfather. At the time, I was 11 or 12, and I had the option of living with my father. Either way, I was going to a new school district, so I did. This meant that I only saw my mother every other weekend for a while. Whenever I was over, though, I always felt uncomfortable in there. I developed a fear of the dark, which I had not had since I was 4 or 5, and I only had when staying in the townhouse. It always felt like I was being watched and in a place I didn't belong. Really, the latter might have been that for the first time I was living in a new place. I remember the basement being the worst part of the house. I refused to go down there alone. It was one huge room the size of the whole house's length and width. The stairs led down to a corner of the basement right next to the washer and dryer. I never would go to the other half of the basement. It was thankfully used for storage, but I always felt someone or thing watching me from that half of the basement when I was down there. It always felt like I was in some sort of danger when I was in the basement. When it came to sleeping, I never really did. I developed depression while I was there as well, something I do have today, but considering some things I've been through in life, staying at that home should not have been the worst of it, but it was. My nights consisted of me staying up with the lights on. My brother's room was next to mine, but seeing as he was much older than me, went to high school, worked a part-time job, and partied with his friends, he was never home. I would hear several times a night the door to the front door open and my brother walk upstairs. My room was next to the stairs, so I heard when people went up and down pretty easily. I remember one night it was constant, the sound of walking up and down the stairs, that I went outside my room to ask my brother why he got home so late, and if he could keep it down. There was nothing there. I checked my brother's room. He was asleep. Turns out he had the night off and didn't go out that night either. He was in his room all night that night. After that, I knew it wasn't my brother making that noise, and it got worse for me. I also started, for some reason, picturing a bearded man in my head whenever I heard the stairs make noise. My brother also got into trouble around this time. He always did hang out with the wrong crowd, but he was in trouble with the cops every other day, it seemed. He knew the cops by name, who thankfully liked my brother enough to consistently never press any charges. He and my mother were always going at it too. I should mention that the house was part of a complex like a Brit-styled house or an American city where it's a full house but the next house is attached. I never met the neighbors, but you could hear the woman and man and their kid often. One other thing before I get into the real freaky stuff. We had only 2 TVs and I liked watching G4 TV's Cheat and X play, but of course I was the only one. So I'd watch TV in my mother's room. It was a master bedroom with a closet and bathroom. I, like the basement, felt like I was being watched and it was uncomfortable. Unlike the basement, I didn't feel in danger. I always kept checking over my shoulder into the open closet and bathroom just instinctively. It was never a good feeling. Now this is where things get weird. Recently I had a nightmare about the place. I decided when I saw my mother to tell her about it, just as small talk. I told her everything in my first 2 posts. That's when she got serious with me. Apparently she had the same experiences but never wanted to alert me or my brother for various reasons. She said she often called me downstairs because she was afraid of the basement as well and would hear shuffling in the back half, where I said it was really creepy. She often heard noises of doors opening and closing and someone walking up the stairs during the day when I was at my dad's. She assumed it was my brother's home early, often because he was, and it sounded like he rushed inside, ran up the stairs and slammed his door but without saying anything. More than a few times, she was home alone during these. We often heard our neighbors, like I said, but she actually talked to the guy living there. On more than one occasion, we heard a woman and man flirting in the evening and laughing and having a good time, usually when we were all eating dinner. Same for a mother and child during the day. The guy living there was a med student who was often not home. He said he was usually out at night and sleeping during the day and told my mother he lived alone. He apparently never heard us even though we were a loud bunch. My mother also said she believed my depression and my brother's anger, which he had been getting more aggressive with, was tied to the home. She actually paid for my brother to move out, telling both of us that she thought it would keep him out of trouble more, which it did, but she really wanted her son to go back to the way he was, which was a fun-loving, nice guy, and he did almost instantly after moving out. My mother's boyfriend, who I forgot to mention, moved in after about a year. Also experienced the same thing, but only told my mother. He said he often saw people walking around in the other room in the corner of his eye, even when he was alone. My mother also told me about this man who she often woke up to. He was always standing in the doorway of her room. She described the man who I pictured in my head, but said he had these sunken dark holes where his eyes should be. Apparently, the look he gave her was one of pure hatred, like she had done something to royally piss this guy off. He was translucent as well, which I think kept her from calling the cops and assuming it was an intruder. Also, that part of the basement that I was terrified of was right under the master bedroom. We asked the managers of the townhouses if there was a death on the property before moving out, or if there was a demolished home or anything to explain the hostility that we all felt from this guy. And there was nothing on the property prior to the complex. No deaths at all because it was so new. I kinda wonder if it was maybe demonic or something. To be honest, I really don't know much about hauntings or demons beyond horror movies, so I could be speaking out my ass. But the thought of that place still scares me pretty badly, in my mid-20s. The thing that scares me the most is that part of me wants to go back there and confront it.
I'm not a believer in the paranormal, so I've always chalked it up to mere coincidence, but I'm sure you'll find this interesting. My grandfather was murdered by a junkie in the house where I live. The incident happened shortly before I was born, and he was hardly ever mentioned afterwards, so I never got to know too much about him. Now, my mother, grandmother, and aunt have told me about something bizarre I used to do when I was 3 or 4 years old, and of which I have no recollection. Sometimes, especially when I had been acting like a dick, they would find me facing towards the wall near the staircase. When they asked me what I was doing, I'd always say that a man with a hat sitting on the stairs had scolded me for my behavior. Of course, when they peered into the staircase, there was nobody there. They said it was very distressing for them, but it wasn't until a few years ago that I guessed why. I found a bunch of old pics of my grandfather, the few that are in existence, and he was wearing a hat in most of them.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.